When you hear the word statistics, what pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's, numbers, charts, maybe even a little bit of math anxiety. But what if I told you that statistics isn't really about math? It's about storytelling. It's this incredible tool for taking a bunch of raw, messy data and turning it into a clear, compelling narrative. And to show you exactly how that works, we're going to start with a story that hasn't even been written yet.
So, I've got a question for you.
What story do these numbers tell? Right now, it's just a jumble, right? A total mess. Think of this like a raw manuscript that just landed on your desk. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense yet, but I promise you, hidden inside is a story. And over the next few minutes, we're going to learn the language to actually read it.
And that language, it's called statistics. It's really just the set of methods we use to collect, organize, and present data. You can think of it as the grammar that lets us turn that random jumble of numbers into a real narrative, one with a plot, with characters, and yeah, even a few surprises along the way.
Okay, so every good story needs a setting, right? A scene. And in data storytelling, that scene is the shape of the data itself. So for Act 1, let's sketch out the big picture.
So first things first, we've got to bring some order to this chaos. Now it turns out, those numbers were the hours a student named Bradley worked each week during a 12-week summer job. Just by grouping them into a frequency table like this one, a pattern starts to jump out at us. You can see right away he worked between 30 and 39 hours most often, actually, for 58% of the entire summer.
And now, let's give this story a visual shape by turning that table into what's called a histogram. All of a sudden, the pattern becomes crystal clear. You don't even need the numbers anymore to see where the bulk of the action is, do you? That tall bar on the right, it tells you so much with just a single glance.
So, when we look at a shape like this, we're basically playing detective. We're on the lookout for 4 main clues to help us understand the story. We want to know where's the center, what's the spread, how wide is the plot, what's the overall shape, is it balanced or kind of lopsided, and are there any outliers, any surprising plot twists that don't seem to fit the main narrative?
All right, with the scene set, it's time for Act 2, finding our main character. And in a data story, the main character is that typical value, what we call the measure of center.
Now, there are 3 classic ways to find this central character. You've got the mean, which is just the good old average. Then there's the median, which is the literal middle value when you line everything up in order. And finally, the mode, which is simply the number that shows up most often. Each one tells a slightly different part of the story.
And check this out. When we ran these calculations for Bradley's hours, we get 3 different results. His average, or mean, work week was 28 hours, but his median was 31 hours. And the mode, the number that popped up the most, was 36 hours. So, which one is the real main character, and why on earth are they different? Well, this quote right here holds the secret. The difference comes from the shape of the data we saw back in Act 1. Remember those bars? Bradley's data is what we call skewed to the left, because those few weeks with lower hours, the 12 and the 16, are literally pulling the mean down. See, the mean is really sensitive to those extreme values, while the median kind of just shrugs them off. This difference isn't a mistake. It's a super important part of the story. Okay, so we've got a setting, and we've got a main character. But a story with just one character standing perfectly still, that's pretty boring. We need some action, some variation. We need to understand the plot's spread.
The simplest way to get a feel for the action is the range. Bradley's busiest week was 36 hours, and his slowest was 12. That gives us a range of 24 hours. Right away, that tells us the full scope of his summer experience, from the easiest weeks all the way to the toughest ones.
But for a more detailed look at the plot, we use something called standard deviation. Now don't let the name scare you. The idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It just measures the average distance of every single data point from the mean, from our center. For Bradley's hours, that number is about 8.5 hours. So what does that tell us? It gives us a feel for his week-to-week consistency. A small number would mean a super predictable schedule, while this bigger number tells us there was a lot more variation in his summer job.
All right, now for the final act of our analysis. And this is the fun part, the hunt for the twist. In any good data story, we're looking for that shocking reveal, that one data point that makes you go, wait, what? We're hunting for outliers. An outlier is basically a value that's way, way out there, far from the rest of the data. And here's the thing about outliers. One could just be a typo, right? A measurement error that we should probably just toss out. Or it could be the single most important discovery in the entire data set. Figuring out which is a key skill for any data storyteller. So how do we find them? Well, for lots of data that follows a nice bell curve shape, there's a super handy rule of thumb. It starts by telling us that about 68% of our data will be huddled up pretty close to the center.
And if we zoom out just a little bit, we'll capture 95% of the story.
And if we go out just a tiny bit further, we find pretty much everything, 99.7% of all the data.
This whole thing is called the empirical rule, or sometimes the 3 sigma rule. And what it means is that almost all of your data should be within 3 standard deviations of the mean. So anything that falls beyond that line, that's a potential plot twist. For Bradley, with a mean of 28 and a standard deviation of about 8.5, that boundary is way beyond his actual hours. So in his story, that week he only worked 12 hours might feel low, but according to this rule, it's not a true statistical outlier. It's just part of the normal ups and downs of his summer.
Wow! We've taken a quick but pretty powerful journey here. Let's just take a second and retrace our steps, from that initial jumble of numbers all the way to a story that actually makes sense. See, we didn't just calculate a bunch of numbers. We actually followed a narrative structure. We sketched the shape to set the scene. We found the center to identify our main character. We measured the spread to understand the plot. And we even developed a technique to spot the twists. This is the framework. This is how you can read the story in pretty much any dataset you come across.
So, I'll leave you with this question. The next time you see a chart in the news or a statistic in a report, remember, you've got a choice. Are you just going to see the number? Or are you going to look a little deeper for the shape, the center, the spread, and find the real story that's waiting to be told?